Season greetings and welcome back everyone to another episode of Lynch Paints, where in this festive video I'm going to be painting the latest Christmas Gobbo Mini. There are tons of detail, there's loads to get through, so I'll keep it short and sweet as best I can. So before we dive in, just a little Christmas gift from you to me. If you were to like, comment, subscribe, share, hype, all that lovely stuff, it makes me very happy. And my gift from me to you is of course this lovely video. So let us grab our festive treats and our favourite snacks and beverages, paintbrushes, and all the... we're gonna need loads of paints, and let's dive straight into this lovely little miniature. But before we dive in, we're gonna need all of the paints, just absolutely all of the paints to this. We got contrast paints, we got shades, we got all of these paints. There's a lot, so just bring all of them if you can. We only have a few paintbrushes, so we're gonna have this rather large fluffy dry brush. We're then going to need a sort of medium-sized basing brush. We're going to need another medium-sized basing brush, but slightly smaller. And there is no teeny tiny brush, but I do have a teeny brush with a lovely little tiny point on it. So first up, we're going to base spray the entire miniature in a black acrylic primer. This is going to be handy for later. I've kept the head separately but there's a lot of detail, so I'm going to keep him to one side for now, and I'll come back to him later. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start out with this lovely Iron Warriors silver, and with our large fluffy dry brush, we're just going to dry brush the entire miniature. You can either stipple it like I am, or you can dry brush however you like. If there's any sort of recesses and nooks and crannies you can't quite get to, then you can use a thinner brush. Then we're going to move over to using a Rune Fang steel, so like a very light chainmail colour, and that we're going to use as a bit of a highlight. Now moving on to some gold, and with this I'm going to keep it very similar to the box art, but you can paint as much or as little of this in gold as you like. But of course, you know, you're going to want to paint it relatively gold because yeah, it's festive. It's a festive colour. It's nice and warming. Then we're going to use a little bit of Auramite gold, and we're going to just sort of use this to highlight some of these gold areas, make them a little bit more shiny and festive and all that jolly good stuff. So the next stage, to do his armour, I have got this Flesh Terror's Contrast Red, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to water it down a little bit with some water or some layman medium, and I'm going to apply this over the metallic areas. So that means then, because it's thinned down, it should show up the metallic paint underneath. Yeah, be careful with some of the areas, you might need a thinner brush, but I just kind of rushed it there a little bit. And it's the same way that I paint 1,000 Suns, and it turns out really well. So give it a go, it is fantastic. If you don't have contrast red, you can always thin down the regular red, and it should have a very similar result. Next up, same again, but with the orc flesh, and just going to do his little sort of metallic socks here. Now we're going to move over onto using white. This is the Corax white, so it's like the base colour, so it's a little bit thicker, goes on a lot smoother. But again, we're going to thin it down just a little bit, just to help with control and to stop any streaking. And we're going to paint all of the brighter white areas, and then of course we'll come back to them later with some various washes and contrast paints and the like. So be careful as well. Use a nice thin paintbrush just going around the face, which I will do later on. And just take your time and have some fun. This is what it's all about. So while we're waiting for the white to dry, I'm going to start on painting the Red Gobbos red coat. So I'm going to mix up some Corvus black and a little bit of Mephiston red. I'm just going to mix the two together, and we're going to wet blend our way to success. And of course, we're going to do the exact same thing with his festive hat, which I've kept separately, and just a little bit of blue tack just on top of a little paint pot. So with this, as we're going to wet blend our way, we're going to keep our paints nice and thinned, introduce more and more red, and work in smaller and smaller areas, and this way we can get a lovely blended smooth result. And then eventually we will do a little bit of highlighting. You don't have to do too much, but it will just make it stand out just a little bit. And while we're focusing on the head, we're just going to paint all of the little white bits and pieces, so I'd recommend just swapping out for a slightly thinner brush. Again, thin it down just a little bit with some water to help control. It's much better to do 2 thin coats than it is to try and muscle your way into one thick coat and it'll look really streaky and not as nice. So while our attention is on the Red Gobbo, we're going to do his skin tone. So I've got a mixture of Lauren Forest, which is one of my absolute all-time favourite paints, and we have as well some Orc Flesh. So we're going to use the Lauren Forest just to do the base colour, and then we're going to introduce the Orc Flesh little by little, keeping our paints nice and thin down to build up our highlights and our lovely green skin tone. I also noticed on the box art that there is some little pink tones here and there, so I'm going to add in a little bit of pink, again keeping your paints nice and thin down. I'm going to add it around the knuckles and also on his nose as well. Just a little bit is all you really need. Then just to complete the skin tone, we have some of this Beltan green, and we're just going to just introduce this a little bit in between the fingers here and just round the neck, and a little bit just on the face just to help deepen those recesses. Then we're going to finish off just the little tiny details with some metallic paints here, just doing his goggles and his little jewellery and little tiny metal accessories. So returning back to our whites, we're going to be using the Apothecary White Contrast Paint, and we're going to go over all of the white areas, so the beard, the fur, and also on the tin can mech himself. We're going to give it a nice generous coat and then leave it to completely dry before we move on to the next step. Upon looking at the box art, I realised that the hat is actually more of like a cream colour, so I've got some of the Skeleton Horde contrast paint, and again I've thinned it down quite heavily because we don't want it too dark of a brown, we just want it as a bit of a cream colour, so we're going to go carefully over the hat, and also we're going to do the same thing over the sack as well. So once the contrast paint is completely dry, we're then going to focus in on all the contents of the bag. So we have a little kind of string of grenades coming out over here as well. We've got a bit of a stick of a tree, and we're just going to sort of draw our attention onto all of these little various items. So as it's a Christmas mini, there are quite a few little baubles hanging around. So one of the ways that I would recommend painting these is to paint them a very bright silver, and then going over the top of them once they're completely dry with a thin down paint of your choice, whether that's going to be a shade or a contrast paint. That will help just to make it still seem shiny and sparkly underneath, and also still be colourful. Then just here I'm just adding in some details on the wood, so making some little kind of stripes over here, just using Mornfang brown and a little bit of white just mixed in, and just doing some little thin lines. And for all the greenery that's around this bag, we're then going to use a little bit of that Beltan green shade. We're just going to pop a nice little coat just going over there, and it will help just to make it look a little bit more detailed. So now we're going to tackle the star, and I have just the kind of paint we're going to need, and it is Imperial Fist Yellow. So we're going to apply a nice generous coat over this. Of course, we're going to have painted it white, very nicely and smooth, and we're going to leave that to dry for a little bit, and it should turn out fantastic. So remember those baubles from before? This is where we get to paint them. So just pick out whatever colour you like, whatever festive colour just kind of springs to mind. If it's regular acrylic, just thin it down with a bit of water. But if it's contrast, you don't have to thin it down as much, just so long as it's thin enough that some of that shine is going to show up through once it's dried. Now we're going to return back to the white areas that we did with the contrast paint. So we're just going to pick out a few highlights just to make the white stand out just a little bit more, using some white scar. And I'm just going to pick out a few bits and pieces. And with the hat, you could, if you wanted to, spend a laborious amount of time picking out all the little raised areas. But I think just a rough sort of dry brush, or a heavy dry brush in effect, will do the job just fine. So we're looking pretty good so far, but looking at the metallics, we're going to need just a little bit of this Agrax Earth Shade just to go over the top, just to darken it down, pick out those highlights, and deepen those recesses. So the eyes of the Tin Man is going to be the same as we did with the bauble. So we're going to pick a red and a blue, and we're just going to thin down the blue, paint one eye, and then I realised that the nose is also red, so we're going to paint that as well. Now, for painting the little light on top of his head, we're going to need these 4 paints. We got White Scar, we got Lothran Blue, got Cantor Blue, and a Korax Black. Corvus Black. That was it. Doesn't necessarily have to be these exact paints, but as long as you've got a white, a mid-tone blue, a dark blue, and a black, then you are sorted. Then we're going to mix the colours in, and again, so just thin them down with some water to help with the whole wet blending process. And this is very, very similar to how I paint eye lenses on Space Marine helmets and that sort of thing. You want to figure out, so the light source is going to be coming from the top, so then you want to build up your lighter colours below, or like from the second half down, and just work in just small amounts. Just take your time, and if it doesn't look great, you can always paint back over it again with the darker blue and just try again, because you're thinning your paints down. It's just lots of thin layers, so it's not going to build up too much. So now I'm going to have a little attempt at painting some stripes on the Dynamite stick. So I have here Moot Green and Corvus Black. So I'm going to roughly mark out where the stripes are going to be going. I'm pretty terrible at doing stripes that are quite neat and tidy, so I'm going to do my best. So I would highly recommend thinning your paints down with a little bit of water just to help with the flow, and that way you gain the maximum amount of control over what you're doing. So this is quite fiddly, and yeah, just take your time with this. You don't have to do stripes. I wasn't going to initially, but I thought I may as well just show you how I go about it. It's probably not the best way to do it, but it's a way to do it at least. Then once the first coat is dried, I'm going to go back over it using more Moot Green just to create a bit of a highlight, and just go into the middle of the stripe rather than the whole thing, so it shows a little bit of edge work as well, and that should just about do it. And then the last thing to do is to do the bow. So I'm going to mix up some black with a little bit of red, then introduce even more red into the mix, and then finally highlighting it with a little bit of red mixed with orange. Okay, so now comes the tricky part. We are going to be painting the smoke curls that are coming out of the Dynamite stick and also the grenades inside the bag. So I've just started out just painting the wick in a nice brown. I'll come back to that later. And then we're going to start with the black and also the Mornfang, no, not the Mornfang brown, sorry, the grey. Going to mix up the grey, Storm Vermin Fur, that's what it's called. And we're going to wet blend here. We're going to focus on the main raised areas, the main chunks of the smoke, and gradually build them up. And then eventually we're then going to introduce more grey and then start to highlight the tops of it to create that sort of effect. And then eventually work in a little bit of red glow into the recesses by watering down a little bit of red and just doing it one layer at a time, see how it looks, and then make any adjustments afterwards that we may need. Then we're going to introduce a little bit of orange into our mixture, and again this is really fiddly. It will take some practice and a bit of time and some patience, but the end result will look fantastic. And if you're not too happy with it, then just go back a few steps, go back over it in like a dark grey just to reset it back to base, and then just try it again, because it is very small. And just use a very comfortable brush, and I trust you, just give it a go and it will look fantastic. Alright, it's basing time. So I have here just a nice standard mid-tone blue, and I believe it's Administratum Grey, the kind of light grey. I'm going to mix the two together about 50-50, and I'm going to use just a relatively chunky brush just to go over the entire base to set the cold tone for the base. Now I'm introducing a little bit of white just to mix into our lovely little mixture, and I'm just going to start out just doing a heavy dry brush over the top, and eventually we're going to start to work in more and more whites and make the dry brushing a little less heavy each time, because we want some of that blue to show up from underneath to create that sort of nice cold feel, and it will look pretty darn good when it's done. I thought I'd do this rather than what's on the box art is just a flat white, and I thought that wasn't too great, so I wanted to kind of build up a little bit of atmosphere by showing this kind of icy snow sort of effect. and it's great. It's dry brushing, so just bear in mind, be careful not to get any of this onto the rest of the model, but it's a lot of fun. So scattered across the base are a few little baubles, so we're going to do exactly what we did before. We're going to start out with a nice, very bright silver. This I'm using Runefang steel. We're going to pick them out, and then once the paint's dry, we're going to go back over the top with a watered down colour of our choice for our little baubles. Now it's time for the most satisfying part, when you get to tidy the base. So this, I'm going to just use a nice crisp black that's going to show everything off, make it more tidy, and then once it's all dry, I'm going to pop them on the turntable and then do our outro. And so at last, here we are at the end of this festive video, and this is how I went about painting the Red Gobbos Tin Boy. It's such a fun little model to do. There's so much detail, there's so many little bits and pieces that really take your eye, really catch your eye, which is why I needed so many different paints. Now, of course, if you don't have all the paints that I had listed at the start, you can always, if you have the primary colours, you can mix your own. So you don't need to go out and spend loads of money on new paints. You can mix your own if you have to, and then gradually build up your pile of paints that do little miniatures just like this one. So I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that made it all the way to the end of the video. It really does mean a lot. And as per usual, you know, do all the like, share, subscribe, hype button down there as well. And comment down below. Did you enjoy this? Do you have one of these as well? Do you have a little kind of Red Gobbo collection going on this festive time of year? I'd really like to know. So with all that out the way with, hope that everyone has a wonderful, well-deserved rest. Whether you celebrate Christmas or you don't, just make sure you have a nice rest, take a little bit of time for yourself, and again, thank you ever so much. Stay safe, stay beautiful, and we will see you all next time.